Hi, Greg here from the Renati Group. Thanks for joining us today. What we're going to be doing today is just having a look at the delivery of fuel and what we deem are the correct procedures to follow when doing it. Now, I'm unfortunately pulled in on a regular basis to have a look at deliveries that have gone wrong and try and determine after the fact what went wrong at those deliveries. Now, there are quite a few things that can happen during a delivery which is going to lead to a non-positive outcome. The first thing is that we can have spillages where product is actually spilt and we have environmental consequences to that. The second thing that can happen is that we have got contaminations where basically the product gets mixed with water and then becomes unusable, or gets mixed in, you have contaminations between various petroleum products like petrol and diesel, which will render that product unusable. And the third thing, which is generally the most common, is that we have losses. In other words, what got loaded onto the vehicle and eventually loaded into or transferred into the tanks, there's a discrepancy that results between the two of those. And then we have to try and determine what happened during the process. Unfortunately, all too often when trying to determine what went wrong with the delivery or where there are contamination, spillage and losses, we find firstly that procedures weren't followed, or secondly, there weren't adequate procedures, and then also the information recorded during the delivery process isn't sufficient to determine what actually happened. I think it's important to understand before we have a look at any deliveries or delivery procedures, there's quite a few connotations or permutations with regards to delivering product. The first is differences between the actual storage facilities that you're delivering the product into. Yeah, what you'll do is that you'll get above ground equipment, which is what we'll be dealing with today. But then in terms of your typical retail environment, the equipment that you're delivering into will be underground. So the methodology that you use to deliver into each of those scenarios will be slightly different. What's also important to recognize is that there's various methods of delivery and actually measuring the quantity of product that goes into the tanks. Now, the most common which we'll be using today is what we term a meter delivery, where what we'll be doing is using the meters that are on the truck to meter the volume of product which gets delivered into the facility. We have got instances where instead of using the truck meters, the actual site itself has got its own pumps and own inline meters. And there what we'll be doing is that we won't be relying on the truck meters, but we'll be relying on the inline meters to actually register the volume that goes into the facility. And then we've also got the type of delivery which we term the SBD or sealed parcel delivery, where there no meters are used. And there basically what we do is that at loading, the vehicle is sealed, and what we do is that we use the gantry meters at the loading facilities to be our determinant of what the delivered product is. So today what we'll be doing is using a delivery from our transporter Kelleran to our sister company Nito Energy into one of their facilities as the base case for looking at what procedures to use when doing a delivery. Okay, due to the fact that we are dealing with flammable products, safety is of paramount importance here. So there's a few fundamentals that need to happen before any delivery can start. Firstly, your truck should be safely parked. Secondly, as Russell shows, your driver should be kitted out in full PPE equipment. The cone should be out and your fire extinguisher should be on hand. And importantly, your truck must be chocked to prevent any movement in the vehicle while delivery is taking place. The first important document to look at before delivery takes place is your bill of loading. In other words, the documentation from the source gantry. There's a bit of information which you'll glean from that. Firstly, you'll glean where the product came from. Secondly, you'll determine what product was actually loaded on the vehicle. You'll see who the supplier was. You'll know who the transporter is. And more importantly, you'll know exactly what volume got loaded onto that vehicle. And that'll be your base case volume that you'll use to determine loss or gains in transit. Okay, the second important thing to check is that if the truck is sealed. Now, at the gantry, generally the trucks are sealed, and any part of the tanker where fuel can be removed in transit is sealed to prevent access to that product. So on our outlet flanges, we have seals, as you can see there. And generally, if we walk to the back of the vehicle, up on the top where your hatches are, that will be sealed as well as your instrument box. An important thing to also check is that if the seals are all intact, that the seal numbers reflected on the seals on the vehicle correspond to the seal numbers that are reflected on the bill of lading at the point of loading. If that all corresponds, the seals can be cut and loading can commence. With regards to safety, it is imperative that there is always someone at the vehicle, preferably the driver and receiving clerk, to ensure that action can be taken if anything should happen during the delivery process. Given that the PTO pumps around about 350 litres a minute, if for some reason the nozzle dislodges from the tank, it can create a huge spillage and serious environmental issues. Okay, so first steps, we have now determined that the product was sourced from a credible source and we know how much is on the vehicle. The next step is to determine how much ullage that we've got in our tanks, so we know that whatever product that we got in the vehicle will actually fit into the tanks we want to deliver into. It's important to understand how much ullage you have in your tank so that you know how much fuel you can dispense from the tanker into that tank. Now, there's two ways of determining what your ullage in the tank is. The most traditional way is manual dipping with a dipstick, where you'll actually take a long dipstick calibrated to that tank, go on top of the tank and measure to determine how much product or how much space there is in the tank to accept the delivery that you want to do. Or secondly, if you're a bit more high-tech, you'll have automatic tank gauging. Luckily at this site we have automatic tank gauging, and I'll just ask you to zoom in to the control panel here, and you'll see at the control panel it'll tell you what the current levels are in each tank. It'll tell you the height of the fuel, the volume of the fuel, the ullage in litres, what the temperature of that product is, and what is quite nice here, if there is any water in the tank. Now, with manual dipping, what we suggest that you do too is that you use water finding paste at every dipping, that you actually manually determine with the water finding paste if there's any water present in that tank or not. So as you can see from here, we can accept just under 24,000 litres in tank 1. And if you look at tank 2, there's just under 15,000 litres which these tanks can accept. One of the things I referred to was the use of water finding paste to determine if there's water in a tank during the manual dipping process. Here what I have on the dipstick, I have some water finding paste with some water, and you'll see once you dip, you'll see clearly the paste turns a different color when it detects water. This should be used every time you do a manual dipping on a tank. Okay, now we know what was loaded on the vehicles. We've also done our dipping on the tanks and we've checked for water, so we know how much ullage there is in the tanks to accept the delivery you want to do. However, before you start the delivery, there are two readings which are critical to record before anything proceeds with regards to the delivery. That being the opening pump reading on the actual vehicle pump meter, or if you have an inline meter, the pump reading on that inline meter. And secondly, the opening dips of the dips that you've done on the tanks that are to receive the product. Once these have been determined and agreed to and recorded, you can then proceed with the delivery. When a delivery is completed, it's imperative that both the receiving clerk and the driver get on top of the vehicle, open the hatches and inspect every single compartment to ensure that it has been completely empty. That way you can ensure that all the product has been removed from the vehicle. Once a delivery is completed, it's critical that the paperwork is done and that the relevant readings are recorded and agreed to and signed for on this paperwork. The first important figures that need to be recorded on the delivery note is the opening and closing reading on the truck meters. Generally this can be gleaned from the meter ticket from the truck that is printed out. There are two copies that are made. One is kept by the customer and one is kept by the driver. The other important figures that need to be recorded on the delivery note is the opening and closing dip readings of the tanks before and after the delivery. This will either be the manual readings that you've gleaned from the dipsticks, or in this case, the information that gets pulled off the automatic tank gauging. Any issues that happen during the delivery, whether it be a spillage, whether it be a breakage, whether it be anything of relevance to the delivery, must be recorded on the delivery note and signed by both parties to enable any further investigation to take place. It's also important that both the receiving clerk from the customer side and the driver who did the delivery sign all documents with regards to the delivery so that everyone is in agreement with what happened during the time of the delivery. Hope you found that insightful. Should you require any further information, please click on the link below.